And we are live, Senators.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. I am Joe Benning, your host for this afternoon's events, also known as the chair of the committee. We have on the committee, going across my screen, Senator Mazza from Colchester and Grand Isle, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator Parent from Franklin County, and Senator McCormick from Windsor County. Today is February 8th, 2022, and the topic for conversation is, at least initially, the Department of Mental Health. We are asking to have some updates, specifically on a report of the residential beds for individuals discharged from inpatient psychiatric care. I'm going to welcome all of you who are appearing before us. Some of you before have heard this speech, some of you have not, but I want to make sure everybody is on the same page. We are on YouTube Live. We have no idea who is watching us. I have to assume there are people out there, and that those people who are out there may not really understand all of the vernacular that we talk about. So as we are going through testimony, if I interrupt you, it's not to be rude, it's just simply to make sure everybody on the outside can understand what we're talking about. And I'll ask you to explain X, Y, or Z before continuing on. I am somewhat surprised to hear we actually do have a lot of people out there watching us on YouTube. And I'd like to welcome all of those folks, especially those who have never been involved in the government process or watched a committee. It may be that a class is watching us right now to learn how committees work. And I want to invite everybody to contribute in one form or another. If you have comments, don't hesitate to let us know. With that, Emily Hawes, Commissioner of the Department of Mental Health, welcome. I have you first on my list on the agenda, and I don't want to upstage somebody else. If you were planning on having somebody else make the initial speech, if you will, but by all means, welcome, and let me know if that is the case, that somebody else should be taking the first step.
Thank you. For the record, Emily Hawes, Commissioner for the Department of Mental Health. And my department has allowed me to introduce myself today. So thank you for having me. With me today, I also have Samantha Sweet, our Director of Mental Health Services for the Department of Mental Health, and Shayla Livingston, Policy Director for the Agency of Human Services. So our plan today is to summarize our report, and then of course answer any questions that folks may have from there. So I'll turn it over.
I appreciate that. Can I just stop you for a second? I forgot to mention one thing, and that is
Sure.
when each of you introduces yourself, the committee knows each other, and sometimes we know you, but again, the YouTube listeners may not have any idea who you are or how you fit into the picture. So if you could give us just a 30-second biographical background as each one of you begins to speak, it would be very much appreciated.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Emily Hawes, like I said, Commissioner for the Department of Mental Health. For the last 5 years, I've been the Chief Executive Officer at the Vermont Psychiatric Care Hospital. And previous to my time at the hospital, I held a couple of leadership positions within the Department of Mental Health, as well as oversaw criminal justice and substance abuse programs for the Claire Martin Center in the community. And prior to that, I come from the state of Kansas, where I worked in the community mental health system there for about 15 years before heading out to Vermont. Thank you. Yeah. So Shayla, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shayla Livingston. I'm the Policy Director for the Agency of Human Services. And for the purpose of this testimony, I also was the Policy Director for the Department of Mental Health when this report was commissioned and written. And so here, both in my current and previous roles. I've worked for the state for about 10 years. I worked at the Department of Health as an analyst there, and then as a policy person there, and then moved to the Department of Mental Health, and now here at the agency. So thank you all for having us. So this report was part of the Capitol bill. So as part of the Capitol bill last year, the legislature approved funding for the secure recovery residence, which is currently under construction. And during that process, there was great interest from advocates as well as folks at the Department of Mental Health in exploring possibilities for residential beds that are unlocked. So the secure recovery residence, as in its name, it is secure, it is a locked facility. And the question is, also when we make these big investments in sort of the higher, more intensive levels of care, making sure that we explore other levels of care as well and give them equal opportunity. So this report did that as the first step in that process. The process is very straightforward. We put out a request for information. So this was not an RFP. This was simply a request for information around residential bed needs and what that should and could look like in the state. That report went out, and then we received feedback from our standing committee at the Department of Mental Health in order to get some input from community stakeholders and not just from our department. And going forward, we will be looking at those answers and how they fit into the different structures that exist and potentially any new structures that we need to develop. So this committee is not looking at this, but there are other committees examining funding proposals and ideas around how to expand sort of our crisis care and mobile response system, as well as our suicide prevention system in the state of Vermont. And then obviously there are opportunities around how to invest some of the ARPA money that we have been working on in some capital improvements to different buildings. So that work is also underway. So just looking at these responses and considering how they fit into the existing pieces that are already moving or what might need to or be considered for additional work going forward. But I am not the content expert, so that's just the process and what's happened to date. And I'm going to pass the baton to Samantha Sweet.
Samantha, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro, Shayla. I'm Samantha Sweet, and I'm the Director of Mental Health Services at the Department of Mental Health. And I have been with the department a little over 4 years. Prior to that, I was in the Community Mental Health Service Division with in leadership. So I was at the designated agencies for 20 plus years. So that leads me to this RFI that we did for looking at unlocked facilities that our community partners found that they needed, and we received 6 responses from the RFI.
So Samantha, you've just given me my first opportunity to interrupt you. I know what an RFI is, you do, but I'm not sure everybody else does.
I should have said that, my apologies. It's a request for information. So it's a little bit different than an RFP, which is a request for proposal.
Right. Now, just for the edification of our listening audience, various government agencies issue either a request for information or a request for proposal, depending on what stage a given project is in. This report that you are about to give us some information on, at what point are we in that process?
So right now we have all 6 responses, and we are reviewing those as a department to determine what fits the community's needs right now, as well as what work is also being done on the side, like mobile response, and how do some of these responses fit into those things that are already being worked on.
So at some point in the conversation, I would like to have one or all of you give us a rundown. It doesn't have to be right now, but I would like, for the benefit of our audience especially, to know what happens when an individual is in psychiatric crisis and the state begins to intervene. Eventually, we'll get around to talking about the brick and mortar that this committee is responsible for. But I would just like to get a lead up to what ends up happening and why we would eventually need brick and mortar to be applied to this conversation. Didn't want to interrupt your flow of thought, so I hope I didn't.
No, that makes sense, and it kind of leads us into where we're at now. So we can definitely explain why we're here and why we put out the RFP. So we have some individuals in our system, and when I say system, we're looking at those individuals across all lifespans that are inpatient, and they're receiving treatment on an inpatient basis, so in a psychiatric unit. Those individuals, we want to serve those individuals in the least, what's the word I'm looking for, Emily? Help me out. The least restrictive. Thanks.
We're required to serve folks in the least restrictive environment.
Yep. So once they are done in needing inpatient treatment, we want to move those individuals to a least restrictive environment, into the community, back into their community. And so, as Shayla said, we do have a secure residential that's being built, but we also need to look at, does our communities need an unlocked facility to treat those that need to be stepped down from inpatient settings back into their community? And so this RFI, the request for information, was gathering, what does our communities need in Vermont? Do we need more unlocked facilities? And so this actually gave us that information. Does that answer your question?
Certainly does. I should
Okay.
pause to ask, though, the secure facility that we currently have, are we talking about the Middlesex facility?
Yeah.
And just to connect the dots for the committee, we know that that facility is currently under a revamping, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. So please interrupt me if you have any questions. I'm just going to launch into the 6 responses we received. We received, like I said, 6 responses. 2 were really focused on the aging population. So more or less a geri-psychiatric level 3 facility. And when I say a level 3 facility, that's licensed by Department of Aging and Independent Living. And so it's, so 2 proposals were focused on the aging population. 1 was focused on a mobile response and a mobile crisis unit, kind of a living room model, which is utilizing peers for that approach. We have another that was therapeutic community residence, which is a group home for adults that would be interested in looking at alternatives to traditional mental health services. So really looking at their medications, how could they potentially even be tapered off medications? So it's really an alternative, holistic therapeutic community residence. Another proposal was for a mental health inpatient treatment center in the Northeast Kingdom, really focusing on suicide prevention. And our last proposal that we received was a proposal focused on enhancing staffing, enhancing peers, supporting that work to help individuals move out of the inpatient setting. So less about bricks and mortar, but more about supporting peers to do the recovery work to move people along the system.
So I hate to ask this because
yeah.
this is a basic question of ignorance on my part. The mobile units that you're talking about, are those units that are actually owned by the state?
So the proposal that was put in was completed by a community mental health agency. So it was one of our 10 designated agencies that put in a proposal for a mobile crisis response in their community. So they would be going out into the community to support those that are in need. And they were also looking at the whole lifespan, so youth as well as adults.
And are these vehicles paid for through the capital bill?
Hi.
Go ahead, Shayla. I see your hand raised.
So this might be causing some confusion. It's not actually a physical vehicle or entity. This is a group of people who respond in a specific way to a situation in crisis. And when we say mobile, what we're actually referencing is that the individual in crisis doesn't have to come to a location like an emergency room or an urgent care center, but rather the clinicians go to them. So not actually a physical vehicle.
That I know is not paid for through the capital bill, so that answers my question. Thanks. Samantha, I think we're back to you.
Okay. Are there any responses or questions about the 6 responses that we did receive?
I think Senator Ingalls is going to ask eventually, where in the Northeast Kingdom are we talking about?
No, actually, I was going to wait, but I'm going to ask now. So I was in a meeting yesterday that Kelsey Stravis had at Northeast Kingdom Human Services, and then Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner Allison Crump was there as well, and Shayla, I think that you might have been there as well. But anyways, something was brought up, and I think that Deputy Commissioner Crump tried to tamp it back down, that we were more getting away from anything that looked like institutionalized facilities, which and then trying to go into a holistic type treatment facilities. And as much as that's gotten tamped down, it's still in my brain, because I know that we talk about millions and millions of dollars of putting these facilities together. And so can we maybe at some point in time during this presentation hear about where the approach is? I don't want to get outside the purview of institutions, but it is part of institutions where we're talking about spending millions of dollars on these. And then can we find out the direction of where we are headed, so that I can get that out of my brain and I can get behind these projects to make sure that further on down the road, we're just not going to abandon them after spending the monies.
I think I can take that one. So actually later today, we have the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services and Ashley Berliner from the Department of Vermont Health Access coming in to talk about a different report on exactly what you're referencing, Senator, IMDs and these particular institutions that CMS has determined that they are thinking of not funding at the same levels that they have in the past going forward. And so I actually think if it's okay with the committee, that conversation is one that you could take up with the secretary and with Ashley Berliner at 3, if that's acceptable. Otherwise, I can try to provide a little more context now.
That work, Russ?
I want to take over this meeting, so I'll wait.
Thank you very much.
Don't worry about taking over the meeting, Russ. I actually have good terms with Alex. He knows how to mute anybody. So I'm sure it's a conversation we should be having, but they are on our schedule this afternoon for 3 o'clock. Okay, anybody else have any questions? I'll ask the question I thought Russ was going to ask. Where in the Northeast Kingdom was this one planned conversation?
If you give me 1 second, I will find out exactly the 2 locations in the Northeast Kingdom.
And while Sam looks at what was submitted in the RFI, I just want to say that I was a part of that meeting yesterday, and that there is going to be more work coming out of that designated agency in conjunction with the hospital and other community partners there to consider what the best option is for that community going forward. So while we can tell you what was submitted in the RFI, I think what's important for this committee to know is that that is it's a starting place, and it was a really helpful thing to have the advocates submit this to us to jumpstart the conversation. But it is still under development, and it could change in terms of exact location or scope as folks get more information.
Well, I jumped into that meeting because I had a constituent that reached out for help, and their child had expressed several times that they were looking to hurt themselves, and that the family just didn't know what to do, and reached out and were told, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, just relaying how it was relayed to me, that there was 80 to 90 kids that were ahead of this one individual. And I will have to throw out a public kudos to Kelsey for taking all of that serious. And certainly all the family was asking for was an outreach, and they provided that. So I certainly know that the need is there, and not to put the kingdom ahead of everybody else. I think what we have discovered through this pandemic, that the mental health of a lot of people, especially our youth, is suffering. So yeah, I'm glad to be part of this conversation.
I would just add, Senator, that we know that the Northeast Kingdom Human Services does not have any residential facilities in their mental health world. So that is definitely a need that we see. Out of the 10 designated agencies, we have 2 that have no adult mental health facilities. So to move people along the system, they're already behind because they don't have that kind of next step for some individuals to go into. So, but the request for information out of the Northeast Kingdom really highlighted that the facility that they're looking at would be out of Newport, but would serve all of Caledonia, Essex, and Orleans counties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, committee? Anything else the 3 of you want to tell us? I am quite sure we're going to have you back. As you know, the Capitol bill is still in the hands of our compatriots on the other side of the building. We're actually the only compatriots that are in the building. Right now, the Capitol bill will probably not get to us until a week or so after town meeting week. And at this point, when it does come back to us, there may be tweaks and people may have disagreements. If that is the case, reach out and we'll see if we can't get you back in for further conversation.
That
With
sounds
that,
great to us.
Thank
you.
you all very much again.
Thank you.
Committee, I do believe we have Bruce Douglas, I see, ready to give us a report from a totally different angle, specifically the Department of Environmental Conservation, and a report that had been issued at our request. Bruce, I want to welcome you to Senate Institutions. The subheading is Technical Advisory Committee on the Wastewater System and Potable Water Supply Rules, and the annual report of the Technical Advisory Committee for 2021. Bruce, I see you also have, let's see, Kristen Ashmankas. Is that how you pronounce your last name, or close enough?
Yes, it is. Good job.
Thank you. Steve Revel is also with us.
Steve Revell.
Revel, all right. I got the hard one easy and the easy one not so much.
Oh, wow.
I want to thank you all for joining us. And just so you know, I give this little spiel to everybody that comes on to speak with us. We are on YouTube and we have no idea who our actual audience is. So what I try to do is keep the conversation grounded to a point where everybody who is out there, that could be a 3rd grade class learning about us for the first time, right on up through experts in your particular fields. The upshot is I'm trying to make sure everybody is on the same page with the conversation we're having. So should you launch into some conversation that brings up an acronym or some vernacular that we understand, but they may not, I may interrupt you and ask you to explain what A, B, or C happens to be. The other thing is, I'd like to, given that we have no idea who's out there actually listening to us, just please give us a 30-second rendition of your personal background, your biography, if you will, and let us know how you came into this picture in your current job function. That would be most appreciated. Bruce, I have you up first on my list. I don't know whether that was the order in which you folks wanted to go, but if not, please let me know. Otherwise, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, Steve Ravel is who's going to start off.
Okay. Well, Steve, welcome.
Welcome.
And,
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Ravel. I'm a licensed professional geologist. I am a long-term member of the Technical Advisory Committee representing licensed designers and hydrogeologists. I have about 40 plus years of experience solving problems, environmental problems. I'll pass it on to Bruce.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Sandra Benning. My name is Bruce Douglas. I'm a professional engineer and the manager of the Wastewater Management Program in the Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Been in this position just for about 9 months, since April 2021. Prior to that, I started my early days of my career. I worked for the same program in the department from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s. And then I went off to the private sector from 95 till last year, working throughout Vermont and New England in the country and a little bit of international work. So most of my career has been focused on this issue of wastewater management at a site-specific level, like a soil-based wastewater systems and small-scale water supplies. So currently I'm responsible for the wastewater treatment and disposal that disperses the treated effluent to groundwater throughout the state of Vermont. And we have 5 regional offices that execute that, and a central office that deals with the larger systems as well. And with that, I'd like to introduce Kristen Ashmankis.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm Kristen Ashmankis. I have undergraduate degrees in physics and marine geophysics. I have a graduate degree in geological oceanography. During my graduate studies, I also worked for civil engineering and geotechnical laboratories as their licensed geologist. I then taught for a while and wanted a break from that. In 2019, I started working for the Division of Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection as one of the regional engineers licensing on-site wastewater systems. In 2020, I earned my Class A license. And in 2020, I also became the supervisor of the compliance team for the program.
So I'm not sure which one of you is going to take the lead on giving us an explanation of the report, but let me tee it up by saying to our audience that the state of Vermont, through each of its respective committees in the legislature, asks for ongoing reports on almost every function imaginable that's performed by the state of Vermont's government. And this particular report is issued, I believe, as a result of Act 133 of the 2001 adjourned session, but it requires these folks to come back and give us a report. This report was due in 2021. And obviously, we're just now meeting in the legislature and seeking to get an update on how it all happened. I'm hoping whoever takes the lead in the conversation will give us the basics of why the report was asked for.
Bruce?
Okay. The report was asked for back in the 01 legislature as we were moving towards universal jurisdiction. In other words, historically, a lot of the individual water supplies and on-site wastewater systems, or septic systems, as it's commonly called, were local, both the combination of local and state jurisdiction, depending on whether a subdivision would be state jurisdiction, greater than 10-acre lots and existing lots would be local jurisdiction. The legislature thought to bring that together, and what they established is this committee to advise the legislature on progress, but a 5-year period between 2002 and 2007 to transition from the mixed jurisdiction to universal jurisdiction. And this committee is part of that process of keeping the legislature up to date, how that is happening, and also what new technologies can be done to overcome site limitations, can be implemented to overcome site limitations. So that also is a significant advancement, if you will, in the opportunity to manage wastewater at an on-site level. Does that answer your question?
That certainly does. Thank you for that lead-in.
All right,
This
Steve.
is Steve Revelle, and I'm just going to give you a very brief rundown of the composition of the Technical Advisory Committee. And this will be brief. It's composed of one or more professional engineers, one or more licensed designers, one or more well drillers, one or more hydrogeologists, one or more delegated municipality people, one or more water quality specialists, and one or more technical staff of the Agency of Natural Resources, and lastly, one or more of the technical staff of the Department of Health. And just moving on very quickly, topics that the Technical Advisory Committee deals with, and there's quite a laundry list of possible topics for this next year. But I'll read you a sentence out of the report which tells you one of the significant things that we do work on. And it goes, the 2019 wastewater system and potable water supply rules have been in use for more than 2 years. And it is a good time to review how they are being implemented and whether there are improvements that should be made. That is something that we work on, frankly, all the time and at every meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to Bruce.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So to give you just a little perspective of where we are in the big picture, we've taken, this is one of the tables in the report. It's table B1 on page 9. And what it shows is the overall trend in permitting of wastewater systems and potable water supplies under the program. And you can see it's kind of started out 2007. There was a lot of permits issued by a combination of the universal jurisdiction transition, people who had applied, just in time to get in under the wire for the change, and as well as the kind of mid-aughts development bubble, if you will, before the recession. So then you see a drop off as the economy shifted a little bit towards 2011. Things stayed pretty stable through 2019, and then you see a significant uptick. The upper line is the number of permits issued, and the lower line is important. It's from the permit expediting program. Something from the late 1980s in Vermont that was established to make sure that there's good turnaround time on the review. You can see the program issued over 3,000 permits in the last calendar year, and the goal of the individual systems, of the small household systems, a 30-day turnaround time. For larger systems, a 45-day turnaround time. So the program met those turnaround time criteria 94% of the time, and 90% is the permit expediting program objective. So it exceeded that in spite of the surge in development activity in Vermont, and as well as we had some retirements and some staff changes. So it's a really credit to the program, to the people that implement it. If you can look at the next graph to give you some perspective, one thing that is always a concern is what the existing systems, how are they managed? Do they have is there a way to upgrade or repair, replace systems that have failed? And so that's what this graph shows since 2007. And you can see that there were a big increase as the program really became established and addressing the need for fixing failed systems. A failed system is defined as either the wastewater is wastewater systems backing up into the house, or it's surfacing, ponded on the surface, running into a stream. And it has to be a chronic fix, not something that can be repaired. It's, not just a diaper clogging a pipe, but something that is intrinsically the function of the system. And these shows, you're also seeing a kind of a moderate fluctuation over time, but then in 2020 and 2021, significant uptake. There's a lot of repurposing of seasonal camps, people working at home, being at home all day, just using more water, and so some older systems or systems that may have had some challenges of being stressed, it came in as failed systems that need to be repaired. And the good news is these systems are being repaired and permitting, and we have a program in place to do that. So I'll turn it over to Kristen to talk about the innovative alternative systems, which is really important tools in our wastewater management toolbox.
So innovative and alternative systems, if you're not familiar with the term, are sort of outside of the box of a traditional septic tank leading to perforated pipe and stone leach fields, right? So almost anything sort of outside of that falls into the realm of an innovative alternative system. And it can be either an innovative alternative dispersal system, so something that's replacing the perforated pipe and the stone, or it can be something that's acting as a pre-treatment system to reduce the need of the cleaning properties of the leach field, right? So it can be some sort of aerobic environment that's going to pre-treat with bacteria before it heads out. So starting in 2012, when it really started being tracked, innovative alternative systems typically require annual reports to us. That's with the exception of Presbys and infiltrators. Everything else requires a report to come in to tell us how well it's functioning, and we keep track of that. 2012, we started to track those. We were tracking them, they were coming in via email until 2019. In 2019, we beta tested an online submission form that went fully operational for all of 2020, and that increased by about 500 the annual reports we're receiving. And we now have the ability to reach out to homeowners to try to get them back on board with the annual inspection requirements.
Kristen, do you know what the original intent was in deciding to plot out this data?
I believe this was an overview of the TAC report, and we were pulling the sort of highlighted tables in the report itself.
Well, I'm talking about way back in 2012. What was the decision-making process that led to us deciding this is data we wanted to have an updated report on?
I cannot tell you. I do not know.
Okay.
And just to speculate, the importance of the data is that these systems are innovative, but most of them require more operation. They require having service providers come and make sure the system is properly functioning. So this is it enables us to track that the systems are being properly serviced. They're overcoming sort of the natural gravity flow, maybe just a pump in a system that can operate and be ignored until it's just except for pumping the septic tank. It can, in maybe occasional routine checks, but most innovative alternative systems are actively treating the wastewater before it's dispersed into the soil. And you need to make sure that treatment system is working. And that's the intent of having an annual inspection and reporting. And this is the data that the top line is the reports received. The bottom line is just where are they? How many systems we have? And you'll see in the report is also the type of systems that are out there. So we can look at the distribution of technologies that we have.
Is there an expectation that these alternative and innovative systems will increase through time?
There is, as properties become less hospitable to a traditional on-site system, right? So as you start to deal with more and more smaller lots, as properties get subdivided, as more and more people want to get in on lakefront property, waterfront property in general, there's more of a call for innovative alternative systems.
Okay.
Really, the advances in the innovative alternative dispersal systems have also allowed for places where you couldn't drive a truck to get a load of stone in. A lot of the innovative alternative dispersals can be hand carried to a site for a leach field.
Okay.
So I think Bruce talked through that second graph. There's 8,336 as of January 1st, 2022, permitted innovative alternative systems. A lot of those are Presbys and infiltrators. There's about 2,000 systems that we are aware of that are installed and requiring annual inspections.
So this is significant that Vermont really has a strong reliance upon this, if you will, distributed infrastructure. Rather than sewer infrastructure is connected by pipes, these are systems individual to each lots or groups of lots and clusters. But it's a very significant program for the health and environmental quality of Vermont. So that's our presentation. Before I welcome questions, there's one thing I just want to make clear. Universal jurisdiction, as I see Senator Mazza has been here. 2 towns have selected to be delegated to run the program. One is Colchester, the other is Charlotte. So they basically replicate the program that the state runs at the municipal level, and the permits are issued by those respective towns. And then they give us an annual report. They summarize what they've done in their communities, doing the similar work to what our regional offices would do.
Okay. Can we take down the screen share? There we go. Now I can see my committee members. Committee questions. Senator McCormick. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks. First, an observation. Well, no, I guess it's really a question. Are we still taking steps to expedite additional lakefront development? We're
not sure.
welcoming alternative systems because it'll help people develop lakeside?
That's, I guess I'm, the intent I'm aware of for the alternative systems is to have the technology not make the determination of what is developable or not, to leave that up to zoning, land use regulations. That was back in the when we transitioned through the 90s and the 2000s to having these advanced treatment systems. It was for a combination of enabling solutions for places that were already developed and didn't have suitable soil conditions and site conditions for a conventional system, didn't have enough space typically or right soils, and to not have the engineering constraint be a constraint for land use. I'm not aware of an intent for specific portions of the state to be developed for this.
Second question, when we talk about alternatives, does that include composting toilets that don't use water at all?
They're already allowed in the rule, so they're not considered alternative. So that and there's a credit. There's still, the household will still if it's a house, you generate water from sinks and showers and dishwashing and laundry sheets. So there is a leach field requirement, but it's reduced because the composting toilet removes the toilet source of water.
It's as needed for gray water rather than.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Do we fund this through the capital bill, or is this I'm trying to relate to the money? Are they asking for money for funding, or how does this work?
Good question.
Yeah, I'm confused of what.
Bruce, are you able to answer that question?
Well, generally, if I may, so we're not asking for funding today, and as I understand it, and because someone knew, it's the general fund that funds this program. We get permit fees, but and the permit fees go into the general fund, and the program is funded from that source. As I understand it, and have not become fully immersed in the budgeting specifics, but that's a big picture description.
Thank you.
Other questions? Folks, I want to thank you for coming out to Senate Institutions. We appreciate you spending some time with us today, and quite possible we may be seeing you again. But thanks for stopping by.
Well, thank you for having us. We're glad to be able to present to you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Is this in the House bill, Mr. Chair?
I am assuming that, but we're going to take a break for a minute. Alex, I'm not sure whether or not we've got anybody coming in for the 2:30 yet.
No, not yet. I think they'll be here closer to 2:30.
Okay. We will have a conversation about that, Dick, probably at the end of the day today after we get offline. How's that?
But this is environmental. This is an environmental subject, isn't it?
I do understand that, but we picked up this conversation from the other side.
So they're taking it up. I'm confused. I'm not.
No, I do understand. It's a valid question. We're going to have some conversation about this later on after we go offline.
I didn't know
Okay.
how it fit in with us. Okay.
Yeah, no, I understand. But again, witnesses, thank you all for coming out to join us. I think we're going to be taking a break here shortly. Alex, I don't know if anybody can be reached in our next conversation to move them up. But committee, I think we've got about a 20-minute break ahead of us because I don't have anybody scheduled technically until 2:30, and we're going to try to move some people up here this afternoon. Unless anybody else has any other issues they want to talk about at the moment. Okay. I'll just come back shortly, Dick, to answer your last concern. a lot of our conversation is generated on what the other side of the building is talking about on their schedule. And I am trying to stay on top of everything so that by the time we get the capital bill, we know what they know. And so that's where this surfaced from. And
I'm just trying to figure out why would they take it up? Because how does it pertain to the capital bill? That's the only question I have.
well, the only thing that I can say is originally when those folks were brought into this picture to give us an annual report, the institutions committees were targeted as recipients of the report. Now, as I'm looking back to the founding language, that was at a time when you and I were both on this committee. And I'm not exactly sure why these reports were generated to come back to us. But it's a fair question.
Looks like Senator McCormick's issue.
No, it's
No?
a fair question.
Natural resources, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just confused how it fits in here. I don't, that's
Yeah.
why I asked if they haven't want any money, or we don't have any buildings that need a sewer system or something. I don't know.
Isn't there money in the capital bill though for the program?
There is for water supply, wastewater systems, and that is probably how this report got us labeled as one of the recipients. But after listening to the conversation, I think you're right. From a capital bill perspective, this does not fall within that realm at all. So I'll take that on my head. That's my bad. The next conversation should be, however, and we are talking about Mental Health Advocacy Day, which is a broader conversation, but part and parcel of the discussion in the capital bill on what we are dealing with for brick and mortar. The folks who are due next to come speak with us had asked for time to come and give us a chat. And I said, okay, why don't you come on in? But at the moment, we don't have anybody scheduled until 2:30. And Alex, I'm going to have everybody come back at 2:15 to see if we've got anybody that's actually on board. I do know that our last witnesses could not be here until 3 o'clock. And that was a more substantive conversation that Russ, you were getting into earlier about the institutions. And I think that's a pretty important conversation to have. So we'll do the best we can. But let's take a 15-minute break